Here are my choices for the 9 worst Claudia books in the Babysitters Club series. Number 9, Keep Out Claudia. I'll give this book credit for having good intentions. It tries to be a serious book about the topic of racism. The book's biggest problem is that it is a 3 or 4 chapter story which gets stretched out into a 15 chapter book. As a result, the story is incredibly slow, and it takes the babysitters far too long to realize the Lowell family is racist. They're blatantly racist many times. The babysitters come across as incredibly obtuse for not realizing this fact. Half of Jessie's books are about racism, so it's hard to believe she doesn't recognize any racist motivations behind the woman who shuts a door in her face and whose kids say outright they don't like black people. That is so blatant, the babysitters should have been able to figure out Mrs. Lowell is racist without having to consult Christie's mother first. The racism story ends in chapter 10, which leaves the book with no major story for the final 5 chapters. It feels like the author didn't know what to write next, so the final third of the book is a boring story about the kids making a band. It doesn't fit in with the rest of the book. Number 8, Claudia and the Clue in the Photograph. Claudia develops an interest in photography and takes a bunch of pictures of a bank. The next day, she learns the bank was robbed. The investigation in this book is dumb. The babysitters think it's suspicious that a banker is near a bank, and they're disappointed when the culprit doesn't confess without prompting. They harass a poor woman with a baby carriage because they think the stolen money is hidden inside. Even though they know the culprit took the money many days ago, do they really expect the culprit to parade around with the stolen money? The police say they can't arrest the banker without a time frame, and this is dumb. All of Claudia's photos contain a visible watch and a visible clock. Claudia arranges the photos to make a time frame, and the time frame discussion just disappears. Never gets mentioned again. It was all a waste of time. The solution comes to Claudia in a dream, which is so disappointing. It's like the author is admitting they couldn't think of a good way for Claudia to solve the case, so they just threw the solution in her lap. The solution is that Claudia uses zoom and enhance on the photos. They show the culprit's watch is a fake. It never changes time. The crucial evidence is hidden inside. Number 7, Claudia and the World's Cutest Baby. Claudia is super annoying in this book. The story is that she becomes annoying and overbearing when her cousin Lynn is born. She refuses to let anyone else touch the baby, and she lectures her aunt and uncle because obviously they are idiots who don't know how to handle babies as well as Claudia does. It's just plain unpleasant to read this book. I don't like seeing the main character turn into a jerk just so they can learn the obvious moral that being a jerk is bad. Claudia learns her lesson when she goes to Philadelphia and is annoyed by an overbearing girl named Melissa. This is another book where the plot structure ruins the story. The baby isn't born until the second third of the book, which makes the first third rather irrelevant. Claudia is out of state for the final third of the book, so she can't continue the story with the baby, making the final third mostly irrelevant. It's sad that so much of the book is irrelevant to the storyline, but at the same time, I didn't like the story of seeing Claudia be a jerk, so maybe that's for the best. Number 6, Claudia and Mean Janine. This is another book where Claudia's a huge jerk for no reason. It's supposed to be the story of Claudia's mean older sister, but Claudia is the mean one. She constantly complains, interrupts Janine, and insults Janine. Yeah, Janine uses confusing words, but that's nowhere near as bad. Grandma Mimi has a stroke and she struggles to get better. It's the best story of the book, but it leads to more one-sided sibling drama. Claudia asks Janine how her day was, and she gets mad because Janine did not talk about Grandma first. Why did you answer the question I asked you? You're the worst sister, Janine. In the mirrored storyline, Jamie Newton is jealous of his sister Lucy. This helps Claudia realize she's jealous of how popular Janine is. That resolution does not fit the book at all, because Janine is not popular. Claudia isn't jealous of her. The book pretends it's a good resolution when it's not. Number 5, Claudia Kishi, live from WTSO. Claudia's bored, so she decides to become a radio DJ. She's partnered with Ashley Wyeth from Book 12. The two of them hate each other's guts, but they slowly learn to become friends. This is an okay story, but it doesn't at all match with the way Ashley acted in Book 12. The radio show is a variety show. They plan a show, and then they record it. That story repeats over and over and over until the book is done. It's not terrible, but it's boring to read the same thing many times without variation. We see a lot of kids audition for the show. Christy auditions a lot, but every time she does something stupid which disqualifies her. It was supposed to be funny, but it just made me feel embarrassed for her sake. There's a subplot about the radio station going bankrupt, but somebody donates a bunch of money at the last minute. Like the earlier photography book, the DJ stuff is all pointless and never gets mentioned again. That's the main reason I didn't like the book. It came at a point in the series where I was bored of books where the narrator develops a one-book hobby that never reappears. Number 4, Claudia and the Mystery at the Museum. This is another dumb mystery. The author did not think things through, and so we get problems. Like the babysitters make a list of suspects, but they don't investigate any of them. They search for some stolen coins for only one chapter. And since the investigation ends so early, there's nothing else for them to do for the rest of the book. Kinda ruins the story. The biggest problem is the positioning during the theft. The culprit is inside, stealing the coins. Claudia is standing at the exit, blocking the doorway. Then she turns around and sees the culprit outside. But the culprit can't be outside. He was just inside robbing the place. It's a major error that someone should have caught. The culprit's plan doesn't make sense either. He sets off the burglar alarm as a bluff, but he does that before he hides the stolen coins. As a result, he's stuck. He's got the coins, but he can't sneak them out of the building because he just set off the alarm. If he had waited 4 minutes before setting off the false alarm, he would have gotten away with the crime. Claudia cold calls an artist whose sculpture is in the museum. He reveals his sculpture has a secret compartment built into it. They see the culprit stealing the sculpture, and then the book skips ahead to when the culprit's already arrested. What, the book can have a chapter dedicated to picking out an outfit, but it can't have a chapter where the culprit is caught? Number 3, Claudia and the Great Search. In my mind, this is the worst Claudia book. It's not the book that I gave the worst score to, but in my mind, it's the worst one. The story is that Claudia thinks she's adopted. This is obviously not true. She's a Japanese kid with Japanese parents. There are no other Japanese people in town who could possibly be her parents. Why does Claudia think she's adopted? Because there aren't enough baby photos of her. There are some baby photos of her. There are photos of her with Janine and the other family members. That is proof the Kishis had Claudia as a baby. But no, Claudia thinks there aren't enough baby photos of her, so she jumps to the totally illogical conclusion that she must be adopted. The rest of the book is her trying to find her birth parents and hitting a lot of dead ends in her investigation. At the end of the book, Claudia asks her parents if she's adopted. They say no. If she had talked to her parents like a normal person, the entire story could have been skipped. Sadly, this is not the only book in the series where the main character panics over an obvious misunderstanding, and instead of easily resolving the situation, they keep it a secret for 70, 80, 90 pages before actually talking to someone about it. Number 2, Claudia and the First Thanksgiving. For school, Claudia and her friends have to help 3rd graders put on a play about Thanksgiving. Abby complains the Pilgrims were sexist against women, which is true. Claudia complains Thanksgiving is racist because no Asians were invited to the first Thanksgiving. I'm pretty sure that's because there were no Asian people within 5,000 miles at the time. Most of the book is a long rant on how Thanksgiving is racist and sexist. The parents get mad. They insist on having a more age-appropriate play about the importance of giving thanks and sharing food with those in need. The babysitters are furious because that would be censorship! They reach a compromise. which is not a compromise at all. They write censored all over the playbills. They hold a protest, and a big fight breaks out when they perform the uncensored version of the play. I mentioned it was a third grade play, right? I've been to multiple third grade plays. The kids are cute, but you honestly can't understand anything the kids are saying. Most third graders don't know how to read out loud into a microphone. The book ends with everybody having a big Thanksgiving dinner, which is a weird thing to do when you just spent 100 pages talking about how awful Thanksgiving is and how anybody who celebrates Thanksgiving is a monster. The entire book is mostly angry ranting where all the characters are so unpleasant I don't like them, even when I 100% agree with what they're saying. And now, my choice for the worst Claudia book, number 1, Claudia and the New Girl. Claudia makes friends with a hippie-style new girl named Ashley Wyeth. They hang out a lot, and Claudia misses 2 club meetings. The other girls start crying and write mean things about Claudia. There's a big showdown at her locker where they demand that Claudia attend the next meeting. Claudia makes absolutely no effort to do so. It's weird. She knows it's important to her friends, but she acts like she doesn't care. I prefer the graphic novel version, where Claudia tries to attend the club meetings, but Ashley keeps distracting her. That better fits the premise that Ashley is coming in between Claudia and the club. Also, Ashley is changed from a hippie to a punk because hippies aren't cool anymore. The club overreacts again. They destroy Claudia's room, they write mean notes for her to find, and they even write a song about how much they hate her. Hate her, hate her, she's a traitor. The issue is resolved with a cop-out ending where Ashley suddenly decides to stop hanging out with Claudia. That way Claudia doesn't have to make any tough decisions. The decision is made for her. She and Ashley go back to being friends at the end, until that radio book which decides, oh no, they were actually bitter rivals the whole time. Just like the Thanksgiving and World's Cutest Baby books, most of the story is the girls being absolutely terrible people, which is not pleasant to read about. There are some books where the club members fight, and that makes for a good story, not this one. With this book, I was constantly repulsed by their actions, and so I gave it a low score. I think if I reread the book, I would give it a higher score. A 1 out of 10 seems overly harsh for this book, even if the new friend and club fighting ideas were reused from book 4. So those are my choices for the 9 worst Claudia books. I think Claudia was a good narrator. That's why I have 9 of her worst books, but 10 of her best books. She had more good books than bad books.